Hey guys, Lou here and welcome back to Acorn Hill. Today I wanted to give you my recipe and show you a quick video on how I make beef Wellington. Beef Wellington is a beef tenderloin coated with mushrooms, olives, and liver. For this recipe I opted not to use liver, and while encasing this with puff pastry, the liver substitute that I used were mushrooms of 3 different kinds. There's no doubt that beef Wellington is delicious. How can it not be? The exterior is a light, crisp, buttery crust, glazed in a deep, shiny golden brown, and twinkling with crystals of sea salt. And then one slices through it, revealing a layer of prosciutto, a duxelle, which is a pate of wild mushrooms, and encased a core of medium rare, buttery soft beef tenderloin. Now for this recipe, we're going to be very casual. What I'm doing in this clip is I'm just searing the beef tenderloin, just making sure that every side, every corner of this piece of meat is completely brown. Here I am searing it with olive oil and 3 tablespoons of butter. Arguably, the beef tenderloin is considered one of the better cuts of meat, but in reality, it's bland and there's no two ways about it. And that's why properly searing it with a lot of butter will give it that buttery flavor that we want. Now what I'm doing here is after I've seared everything, I will be relaxing this meat. In fact, I had to put this overnight in the refrigerator. Let's move on to the puff pastry and the pate. Like I said, this recipe is simple and all I got was store-bought puff pastry. Once correctly defrosted and easily malleable, it is now time for the pate to be spread on top of the puff. Traditionally, this type of pate is called a duxelle. At its simplest, a duxelle consists of finely chopped mushrooms cooked down in butter with shallots into a thick, flavor-packed mass. It's used to stuff tarts and pies and can be stuffed into chickens, and in the case of beef Wellington, it completely surrounds the piece of meat. At the very minimum, I like using 3 different kinds of mushrooms for my duxelle or pate. I like using button mushrooms, shiitake, and portobello. One tip to control and prevent moisture is to squeeze out all the liquid coming from the pate before spreading it onto the puff pastry. Alright, now for all its steps and ingredients, beef Wellington is really not a difficult dish technique-wise. There are 2 things to note to making the perfect beef Wellington. One is excess moisture and the second one is the time of cooking. Let's start with tackling the first problem, the moisture barrier. There are plenty of juices that are trying to escape when cooking the beef Wellington. As I mentioned earlier, the first thing to do is to squeeze out all the liquid coming from the pate. And the second remedy, which you can see I am doing in this clip, is placing sheets of thinly sliced prosciutto on top of the pate. And the next step is placing the beef fillet right on top of the prosciutto. This leading to the all-important step of wrapping the beef fillet. So long as the pate have cooked to a paste-like consistency, wrapping is relatively easy. You want the beef to be encased in the puff pastry very snugly, so what I did in the beginning was anchor the opposite end of the puff pastry by pressing it firmly on the work surface. This provides the tension that I need as I roll the puff pastry with the beef in it, almost like rolling a sushi roll. I also made sure that each end of the rolled log, so to speak, is nicely tucked in and snug, not leaving any air pockets because this will not provide even cooking toward the end of the beef. I chill it in the fridge for 30 minutes and turn the oven on at 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it's time to apply the egg wash. For this Wellington, I'm planning on putting another layer of puff pastry, so this first application of egg wash is done very briskly so I could get a nice glue in between the 2 puff pastries. You'll see what I mean in a little bit. And again, just remember, apply the egg wash briskly so we don't get too much egg wash and flooding. We don't want to create too much moisture as I apply this second layer of puff pastry. Store-bought boxed pastries come as a pair. For the second piece, what I've done is I've created slits that are staggered. These are 1/2 inch slits that I've cut through the puff pastry. What it will do is create a honeycomb pattern as it bakes in the oven. Next step is to again do another layer of egg wash, keeping tabs that this other layer of egg wash should be thin and not dripping so that we don't get any soggy bottom as it drips down to the side. That's what we wanted to prevent. Alright, so at this stage we've seared the beef, we've wrapped it with the pate and rolled it with the puff pastry. And it's at this point that we can put it in the refrigerator for a couple of days. This makes beef Wellington one of the more party-friendly dishes that I know. But since my oven is already heating at this point at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, it is now time to take it out of the oven. I paint it again with more egg wash, and this will give it that glossy sheen and deeper color when it bakes in the oven. And just a couple more side notes. There's nothing worse than undercooked puff pastry. They're usually gummy and bland. To get good results, you must use a relatively high heat. This initial blast of high heat causes the moisture in the layers of the butter within the pastry to suddenly expand, forcing the layers of pastry apart and giving it its light, flaky texture. And here's another tidbit of cooking science that I like. By causing the puff pastry to quickly expand, you introduce plenty of air spaces within the structure, which will in turn give it better insulative properties, allowing the beef within to cook more gently and more moderately. 425 degrees Fahrenheit, a chilled tenderloin will take between 30 to 40 minutes to reach an internal temperature of 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. A handy meat thermometer will always do the trick for you. Alright, so while the Wellington is in the oven, let's make the gravy. This gravy is very simple, and so I'll put all the ingredients and you can just watch and see how I do the simple mixing of this gravy using my favorite ingredient, blue cheese. Ovens are made by different manufacturers, and for the oven that I used, it took about 45 minutes to actually get this type of roast. It's brown, flaky, and the puff pastry really has developed that good brown shellac color on it. I'm pretty thrilled with the results of this bake, and as with any roast, you should let it rest a bit after coming out of the oven in order to help it retain its juices better when you slice it. In my case, there's just a drip or two of juices that came out, but believe me, these juices are well intense in flavor and very savory to taste. This Wellington is complex, beefy, buttery, oozing with a little bit of juice, and packed with flavor. It's hard to get more decadent than this, my friends. And there you have it, my friends. It's a basic recipe and a primer on how to make beef Wellington at home. It can be made with any cut of meat. Just make sure that you rest it, put it in the refrigerator overnight, just to make sure that all the juices are really kept within the meat. As the be-all, end-all to all decadent roasts and an absolute classic, I guarantee that when you make it and serve this, you will be a hit on your next family gathering. Thanks again, guys, for keeping me company and for the pleasure of your time. If you like our videos and things that we produce on Acorn Hill, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more contents coming up. This is Louie, and we'll see you next time here on Acorn Hill. Bye-bye for now.